Hello again. Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, George Plaster of Nashville Sports Radio. We thank our sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We also thank our co-presenting sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Former Vanderbilt baseball outfielder Brian Reynolds finishes 5th in the National League Rookie of the Year voting. Tough year to be a rookie in the National League. Pete Alonso, who hit 50 home runs, wins it. Mike Soroka, the Braves, 2nd. Fernando Tatis Jr. of the Padres, 3rd. And Victor Robles, the center fielder for the world champion Washington Nationals, finishes 4th. Today's guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for 5 or 6 years now, and I won't go back. They're fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. George Plaster joins us today. George, appreciate you joining us. Are you ready for another award-winning podcast here?
Chris, I'll say this. I'm ready for a podcast. The award-winning part may be a little shaky.
Oh, we're going to win some awards. I was going back and looking at some of the titles of the shows I've had this year. And I'm just gonna read some of these off, okay? This has just been since the start of football season.
Okay.
Injuries, depth chart deception in Georgia. Offensive concerns, then a new outlook on the schedule. When identity gets in the way. STI, that might have been a regrettable title choice there. Didn't exactly think that one through. Willie Donick is still optimistic about football season. What's going wrong with the X's and O's? Revisiting expectations. How should Vanderbilt line up along the offensive line? Finally, there's a victory to discuss. So now what? UNLV may be Vanderbilt's worst loss in decades. Leaders needed. Malcolm in the middle. Let's ride. Putting mixed signals into perspective. What's on the horizon? More unpredictability ahead. And Seabass returns from the pit of misery. That may be a personal favorite. So.
Budweiser thanks you for allowing them to be a part of this.
That is some award-winning journalism right there.
Well, it doesn't get any better.
I called you last night. I'm just like, okay, you've been through a few of these. What advice do you have for me that I need to hear? That's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, it's a rough deal. I thought, first of all, let me start with a couple of positives. I thought at South Carolina that they played really hard. Defensively, they were pretty good. I liked the effort. I think their defense, just to steal some stuff from Watson Brown on our show yesterday, I think their defense has come a pretty good ways in the last couple of weeks. If you go back to when they played LSU and it didn't look like they could stop anybody, what I saw Saturday night was encouraging in that area. Now to the offense. I think there are two problems. First of all, they're not getting anything done on offense. And secondly, I think they're going into it with this very cautious, don't make any mistakes, don't do anything mindset. When they got up 7-0, it was almost like they turned to the defense and said, there's your 7 points. Now go win it for us. And the problem with that is this isn't the Southeastern Conference. This is not the Patriot League or these are good football teams. And, if you expect to go in and win scoring 7 to 13 points, guess what? You're not going to. And that's a mindset on their end that's got to change, because it gave them no chance to win at South Carolina.
I have learned one thing over the years is that when something goes off the rails bad, it is like 100% of the time this transcends the X's and the O's, if that makes sense. And I think if you want to boil it down, and nothing ever boils down to one thing, but I think this is a lot of it. It looks to me by the way they are playing that they have some sort of buy-in and rebirth on defense. Now, the performance the other night wasn't great, but the last 2 weeks have been better. I don't know if I said last night. What I meant was Saturday. Anyway, on offense, I don't think there's any buy-in or cohesion or any trust right now, and I think that's a lot of what's going on.
Well, let's take that for a minute. If you knew before the season started that Kalijah Lipscomb was going to be no factor for several games, and that Pinckney is missing in action. He's on some witness protection program, and to me, a lot of that's their fault. They don't get it the ball enough, so that only one of the big three going in would be getting anything done, and that's Keyshawn Vaughn, who has been terrific. Then, what would you have expected? You would have known that offensively they were going to struggle, that about the only thing they could do is give the ball to Vaughn and hope for the best. And you combine that with the fact that whatever it is they're putting out there that isn't Kalijah Lipscomb and Pinckney, that they've got this mindset where they're not going to take any chances. They're going to try to win 7-2 or 7-6 or 7-3. It's a recipe for failure. It's just not going to work.
You and I talked about this last night, and you said this, and I think it's true. This just looks like 2014 all over again. I mean, across the board.
Unfortunately, it really does. If you go back to Derek Mason's first year, you remember the quarterback fruit basket turnover. He played about 4 different guys, including Stephen Rivers, the brother of the LA Chargers quarterback, Phillip Rivers. And we could have only hoped that it would have been Phillip. But even then, I wonder if it would have worked. So they were playing all this fruit basket turnover at quarterback. They seemed to have no direction whatsoever at that point. And some of this go-around is due to injury, but some of it also is due to their indecision. It just looks like Derek Mason has reverted back to some of the year one panic that resulted in the kind of season they had. I don't know. I don't pretend to know what's going on in their locker room, but my suspicion from afar is it's not particularly good. I don't get the feeling there's a lot of buy-in, especially on the offensive side. I don't know what to say when it comes to Riley Neal. He's been okay. I wouldn't say he has been great. I wouldn't say he stunk up the joint, but he probably hasn't been good enough for them to get where they want to be. The bottom line is, if nothing else, this has given us all a whole new appreciation for how good Kyle Shermer was, because he allowed Derek Mason the freedom of not panicking into this 4-quarterback, fruit basket turnover kind of stuff that we're watching right now. And Kyle Shermer not only was really good, but he was really durable. He answered the bell for 3 years. And the fact of the matter is, had he not been what he was, Derek Mason would already be gone. Kyle Shermer basically was his insurance policy. He was pretty damn good.
Lots of things there. I think to the last thing, I completely agree with Shermer. And it's funny, they spent a lot of the offseason talking about how, well, now that Kyle's gone, we've got guys with more mobility. We can expand the playbook. That is not exactly how it has played out. Second, I think you had leaders on that team last year. I think you had him. I think you had Bruno Reagan, probably Justin School. I think you have an almost complete absence of that on the offensive side of the ball right now. And third, he's gotten back into this inability to explain anything cohesively or satisfactorily at his press conferences, to the point where there were threads on our board that I had to step in and say, no, that's not the issue, where based on his comments, he being Mason, people's opinion after hearing him speak after the game was they had a player who's mentally ill, which is not the case. But that's where people went, just because he is back to just saying things that just seem to cause more issues. I don't know how else to put it. I'm not trying to pile on, but it is what it is.
Well, unfortunately, it does look a lot like his first year. I think the best thing that I'm seeing, I'm going to try to go back to positive for a second. I'm sure he's gotten more involved in the defense. And in the last 2 weeks, that shows they're playing very hard. I really admire the effort that they're giving. On the flip side, I'm with you. Excuse me. I'm with you. I don't see anything on the offensive side. I don't know how you could have a lot of buy-in to what it is they're doing, other than just simply feeding Keyshawn Vaughn and hoping for the best. The rest of it is kind of a quagmire. And if he wants to keep this job, he is going to have to figure out this quarterback situation. He's going to have to figure it out pretty quick, and certainly injuries aren't helping him. But the bottom line is, you can't play football at this level and say, man, if we score 7 points, that'll be good enough. Our defense will hang in there. Because the problem is, when your offense goes 3 and out as often as theirs does, you reach a point. One of the key stats that you don't ever hear talked about is the number of plays that a defense is out on the field. I had a coach once tell me, if it gets much past 65, the law of diminishing returns kicks in. And if you get much farther than that, it can really get dangerous. And I tend to believe that. And I think that's one of the problems that they're dealing with in the South Carolina game. Those kids had to be tired by the end. My goodness.
Yeah, well, they got to 80 plays, I believe, did South Carolina. And to the quarterback thing, based on what I have heard, and these come from people that know what's going on, I think that Mo Hassan is their only workable option right now for a few reasons. And by the way, you look at how that translated in terms of the energy that they showed that was so out of the box for the rest of the season. But honest to God, and this is me sort of speculating, again, based on just some knowledge of the history of the situation, I don't know that he'll ever get cleared to play another snap there. So if that's the case, then what?
You're saying cleared to play because of the concussions.
Yeah, Vanderbilt is notoriously stringent about clearing kids. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I think that is one of – there are aspects of Vanderbilt where the way that they prioritize sports, sometimes that has some good things. And I think in this case, it's looking out after your kids. Sometimes
you're stating it as a fact.
Yeah, I'm just saying based on their culture and the way they prioritize sports, like I think that it is really hard to get cleared for concussions. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it is looking after the kids. Now, I think at other places, a lot of times where you have different motivations and maybe different people making the calls, a kid that doesn't get cleared at Vanderbilt maybe gets cleared somewhere else. And again, I'm not saying that to be critical. It's just sort of the fact of the situation. I just question whether he will be cleared the rest of the year. From what I heard, he looked fine the night after the game. Now, I am not an expert at concussions. I'm not saying that to say that, that they're making a horrible decision, put him back out on the field. I don't have enough knowledge of how that works. But what I am saying is, from what I was hearing, he looked fine the night after the game, yet he did not practice for 2 weeks because he couldn't get cleared. And I think he was held out a significant amount of last year, too, for the same reason. Right or wrong, and I do not know what is going to happen, I just have a degree of skepticism that he will be cleared again. Now, I hope I am wrong. I hope he is okay. It would be great to see how this plays out, but I'm just skeptical based on their history that will happen.
That's really interesting, and your perspective is a really good one, because as close as you are to this is the kind of inside info that you know more about than virtually anybody. Whatever the case, Chris, I thought Saturday they played at a deal that I would call 10 yards at a time. Not a lot of chunk plays. You know, for them to get anything done, they're going to have to get some chunk plays bigger than 15, 20 yards from time to time. They're just going to have to, because they've got to get that defense off the field. I didn't know the number of plays when you threw out the number 80. You know, that explains why in the fourth quarter they looked gassed, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and I'm looking up the box score to make sure I got that right. Total offensive plays 80 to 50.
80 to 50. I mean, think about that. That's 30 plays. It's not necessarily 10 3 and outs difference, but it's 30 plays difference. And unless you win the turnover battle by a really wide margin, 80 to 50 is never going to win you an SEC game.
George, if you're cool with this, let's go into the mailbag, because I think there's a lot of listener questions that really hit probably all the areas where we need to go next.
Let's do it.
Our mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, or landlord insurance? What about life or commercial insurance? Josh can help you with all those things. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent and a great dude. Hope you'll make him yours as well. You've got nothing to lose. Give Josh a call and see if he can help you. All right, I think this is the pressing question. Natchez T. Ray says, how long does Vandy hold on to Derek Mason?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, in the athletic director world, not only do you have to think about wins and losses, which is an obvious, you also have to start factoring eroding fan base, which, that could be the easy out if they want to get rid of him and just say, we've reached a point where it's so bad attendance-wise, we got to do something. I think the other thing that Malcolm Turner has got to sort of measure is what's the vibe of this team. I don't think Derek Mason is helping himself at all with some of the stuff that he puts out there in press conference settings. You chronicled some of it earlier. If you're smart enough to say, whoa, what is that about? Well, so am I. And if that's the case, certainly Malcolm Turner is. And he's got to be sitting there going, what is the direction of this? And I think that right now is an area that Derek Mason's got to clean up, because Malcolm Turner is evaluating him.
I just don't know how he fixes this.
Well, I don't know how he fixes it either. There's nothing easy about any of this. If it were easy, I'd sign up for it, take the 2.5 million and go. But the bottom line is he's gotten the defense to a point of being way more respectable. And now what he's either got to hope happens is that the offensive minds that he has hired will figure out some things to mask the difficulties. I think they got to get Kalijah Lipscomb mentally, physically, whatever, back. I think they've got to have a renewed, we're getting Pinckney the ball come hell or high water, and start using the weapons that looked like on paper they were dangerous. And then hope they get decent enough quarterback play. We're not asking their offense to score 40, but they need to have the goal of trying to get into the upper teens and low 20s, 30 of number of plays run, and, that they can stay in some games. But if you're playing with the attitude that if we score 7, then that ought to be enough for the defense, they're going to get their butt handed to them.
Question also from Natchez T. Race. If and when they let him go, who are your top 3 realistic candidates to be the next coach?
Wow. First of all, let me say this. On the Jeff Fisher rumor that's been out there for a while, if I'm Malcolm Turner, I would meet with Jeff Fisher, because one box that Jeff Fisher checks better than any other candidate is the ability to create instant interest, instant fans. I'm not necessarily lobbying one way or the other. I'm just saying that that's an area they need fans. And right now they don't have a lot. And Jeff Fisher would instantly change that feeling in this city. I'm not saying necessarily that I would hire him, but I'm saying I absolutely would meet with him. I'm a little biased on this one. I would check into Will Healy from Charlotte. Will Healy is a relentless recruiter, as the people at Austin Peay learned. He is, first of all, he's got Vandy ties. His uncle, Chip Healy, who just passed away about 2-3 weeks ago, so he's been around this. He knows what the lay of the land is. He would be a very interesting candidate that I think they absolutely have to meet with. Now, his record at Charlotte in year 1 is not going to be great. I wouldn't pay any attention to what he does at Charlotte. I would pay attention to his relentless recruiting, which has upgraded Austin Peay tremendously. And the other thing is, knowing Will, he will interview very well. He'll make an impression. The guy at Clemson, you're going to have to help me with his name. I want to say Tony Elliott.
Yes, the offensive coordinator, yes.
Yeah, that's a name. Look, anybody involved with one of these schools that's winning and winning big, Clark Lee at Notre Dame's another one, defensive coordinator, because he's got a past history here. I'm leaving a bunch of names out. I'm sitting in my car, and this is probably not the great place for me to play rumor mill, but you know what? I did the best I could.
Well, I've said this over and over. You have to have a guy who can be a CEO and stay on top of the details, because that is what has helped other coaches to succeed. And I think that's non-negotiable. I don't think the point is find an offensive coach, find a defensive coach. The point is, part of the point maybe don't put your fans asleep, and that's got to be considered. But I think you have to have a guy that can stay on top of those things, that can give coherent answers in press conferences, that knows how to work with the media, that understands perceptions, that understands getting fans in seats and all those things. I mean, look, it is a tough job, but that's why you get paid $3 million a year to do this thing.
Absolutely. It is a tough job. And when Derek put out, a very impassioned plea after the Missouri game, which had some people really liking it and some people not really liking it. One thing that did cross my mind is, that's part of the reason coaches get paid more than sports talk show hosts, is to put up with all that crap and the questioning and the badgering. Some do it really gracefully, some do not. But whoever they hire, I would put this out here strongly. That person needs to request about an hour of James Franklin's time to pick his brain and say, you know, you beat the system. Tell me how you did it.
Yeah, boy, I've got a lot of thoughts on this, and I think I'm just going to table them for a different podcast when this goes, whatever direction this goes. And if it goes badly, I think there's some other things I want to follow up on, but I'm going to hold some thoughts on that. I'm just going to go through the rest of the mailbag here for now. J2M says Damian Allen or Deuce Wallace.
Well, Damian Allen was when I was there, and he was not a great quarterback. Deuce Wallace, and let me say this: Damian Allen had a lot of chances, started a lot of games because they simply had nothing behind him. Deuce Wallace is a little bit of a different story. A young man that, a lot of people think there's something there, but he's been mostly a relief pitcher and okay, this didn't work, so you can go in and you've got 2 series, and if it doesn't work, we'll put somebody else in. I'm not sure I'm ready to throw Deuce Wallace out with the bathwater. I know it doesn't look good right now, but the methods that he's been used normally don't lead to a lot of success.
I think you said it really well. I think when the whole batch goes bad, and you saw this during Robbie Caldwell's tenure, which I guess to lead what I was thinking about talking about, but saving for later, what I'm thinking is like, okay, when they hired James Franklin, you're thinking there is no way they're going to win for 3 or 4 years, right? Because he looked at the product on the field and they were awful. And sure enough, he comes in the next year, takes them to a bowl, and look at what they did. They darn near beat a top 5 Arkansas team. Winning 6 games was incredible. And then, of course, everybody knows the history of Franklin. Then on the other side, you had what George McIntyre walked into, where I think he lost his first 17 or 18 conference games. And it was so bad that probably nobody was going to fix that. I don't know what the answer to the situation that a hypothetical next coach would take over. But back to your point, I think there is some element that maybe quarterback play, well, certainly poor quarterback play has contributed to the problem. But I think when the whole thing goes bad and effort is affected across the board and things like that, you almost, I think throwing the baby out with the bathwater is a good way to put it. I don't know, in a way, as bad as it is, that you can go there.
No, and I'm not willing to, because I think the role that he's been put in is kind of a scatter shot. All of a sudden things go bad and, okay, Deuce, give it a try for 2 series. It's hard to play that way. And look, I don't know him. I've never talked to him about it, but I've been around this enough to know that that's not an easy way to make a living. And very few people prosper when they're handled that way.
Dorking says, agree or disagree, Vanderbilt had a respectable record the last couple of years only because of Shermer and Ludwig. Without them, Mason is failing, parentheses, quote, despite being built for the job, which, of course, was a bit of a shot at what he said a couple of weeks ago. Your thoughts on that? I think we've really hit on most of that already.
Yeah, look, Shermer was really good, and he was even better than we hoped he was going to be. There was always a lot of promise there. I can remember walking out of a game against Florida saying the biggest problem is they won't turn this kid loose. And by the end of the season, they were willing to. Remember, in a 45-34 win over Tennessee, he went absolutely crazy. And it was the first time that I had seen a Vanderbilt football team get behind Tennessee's secondary for 50-yard chunk plays in years, and they did it twice in that game. And I remember thinking, this kid's pretty good. And over the next 2 years, not only was that kid really good, but I keep going back to durable because it's not as though he had Georgia's offensive line in front of him. Not that they were bad, but his durability, his ability to answer the bell every week was huge. And has he saved Derek Mason's job? Probably. But a lot of coaches get their job saved by great quarterbacks.
Well, and give him credit too. He recruited Kyle Shermer, and
Absolutely.
the staff helped develop him.
Yeah.
So you've got to give him, and not that you are not, but people have to give him credit for making that work too. Now, I don't think he's developed another quarterback since he's been there, but fortunately they had one that gave them 3.5 pretty good years on the whole. So, and is now with the Chiefs, by the way. Let's see.
Yeah.
Bighorn Sheep says, what does it say about the offensive minds of the coaches when Jared Pinkney has 15 receptions on the season and only 6 for 38 yards over the last 5 games? And he adds in parentheses, I'd say not a lot more targets than receptions either.
Well, I think he knows the answer to that question before he asks it. It is an indictment on their offensive staff that they have not done a better job of getting the ball to him. It's an indictment on that staff that they have not really, it doesn't look to me like they have game planned to say, we are getting Pinkney the ball, period. The question is absolutely correct. I mean, we saw how good this guy could be a year ago. He was devastating. And, he was one of the big three. And right now, the big three, for all intents and purposes, is about 1.2. And that's their fault, or at least some of it is.
I think you said it perfectly. I think they're getting a 0 out of Lipscomb. I think they'll probably continue to get a 0 out of Lipscomb. And by the way, Bruno Reagan wrote a really great piece on our site. It's premium content. If you think about subscribing, now's a good time because Bruno really, I think, was very honest. It's hard to find a guy who is a former player that can give you perspective but does not pump sunshine. And what Bruno wrote this week was perfect. I think that they've got Keyshawn Vaughn. I think Keyshawn's playing hard. I think Keyshawn's probably playing for himself in a lot of ways, which I would be too. But I think in this case, there's not really a conflict with the team goals because that's really all they have left. Pinkney, I think, has just been in and out all year, and I think the frustration has gotten the better of him too. But I think a 1.2 is is a good way to put it, and at least Pinkney's still out there.
And 1.2 was never going to be a recipe for this team to do well.
That begs another question. When you build something, and a lot of their marketing and promotion was done around the big three, and I thought that was a good idea because when you're Vanderbilt, how often do you get a chance to promote that? But is it fair to say maybe some of that's backfired?
Well, yeah, it's a tricky deal. I remember the Braves did the same thing with Dansby Swanson, and it was very unfair because, you got a superstar in Freddie Freeman, and yet they decided to put all that on Dansby. In the marketing world, you got to put it on somebody. And so if you put it on those three, you spread it out a little bit. Vaughn has been everything that we knew he would be and more. I just am amazed when I watch him. Nobody brings him down. The first tackler never seems to get him. He's a terrific running back. I still think there's something there with Pinkney. You've kind of told me what Bruno has written on Kalijah Lipscomb. That's really an unfortunate situation. Don't know how it got there. If I'm Derek Mason, I'm trying to figure out a way to fix it because they need him. They need every offensive weapon they can get because they proved a year ago when that group is clicking and you have Kyle Shermer, they were pretty damn tough. Ask Tennessee, because Tennessee had no answers for what that threesome and Kyle Shermer were doing. And right now, that's just that's a distant memory.
Dusty Orleans says, looking at the rest of the year, if this same team shows up against ETSU, can they win? If the team that beat Missouri shows up, is that even good enough to win any SEC games, especially since the quarterback situation has gone from bad to worse?
It's a really good question, but I think I think part of it is how competitive are they down the stretch? Does he keep the locker room? Does the offense start to show a few wrinkles that give you some reason for encouragement? I don't mean to be ugly about this, but I keep harping on it. It was very obvious to me when they got up 7-0. It was just sort of, here's your 7 points, go win. And you got to have some creativity. If you don't have the when they didn't really have the horses that everybody else had, it's up to the offensive staff to get in there, spend the 8 hours a day and figure out some things that give you half a chance, that allow you, instead of 10 3-and-outs, to have 6 3-and-outs, keep the ball longer, get into a 20-17 game, and who knows what happens. That's the mindset you got to have.
By the way, a footnote to this conversation before I move on to the next question. Offensive snaps in the Missouri game, Missouri 66, Vanderbilt 61. So I think that was a key stat in that game. Vandy Nash asked a good question. What do you think of the coaching decision of not going for it on 4th and 2 at the South Carolina 38-yard line early in the game?
He knows the answer again before he asked the question. I'd have gone for it. What do you got to lose? Now if you don't make it, obviously there are certain consequences, but you're the underdog. You're a big underdog. Nobody necessarily thinks you're going to win. This is your chance to apply a knockout punch. And the question is, do you have a play in your back pocket that you feel pretty good will work? That's what offensive coordinators and head coaches have to decide ahead of time. If we get in this situation and we know it's the right thing to do to try to apply the knockout punch, do we have the play in our hip pocket that will work? And, I don't agree with the decision, but I also don't have to sit there and make it with a split second. But I do wonder, did they have that play in their hip pocket? Because if they did, they should have used it.
Two things. I think the observation you made earlier about kind of getting that early score, and then, or maybe this was the phone call we had last night, although I think you touched on this. You said basically
it's both.
Yeah, you said that basically it looked like they got their 7 points, and all right, now let's let the defense win it, which is always his default. Second thing, I'm going to read you the Missouri game. Keep in mind, this is probably their best offensive performance of the year. Here are their drives. Plays and then yards. 3 for 9, 3 for 8, 6 for 19. Those were all punts. 8 for 68, touchdown. 3 for 4, 5 for 14, both punts. 1 for 61, that was a touchdown. 3 for 4, 3 for 8, 3 for 26 and an interception. 5 for 14, punt. 7 for 65, touchdown, and 11 for 55, run out the clock to win the game. Point being is, they don't have an offense that is going to sustain drives. So when you have a chance, you better take your shot. And it doesn't get much better. I mean, they don't get much closer than the opponent's 38 more often than not.
Right. He's got to get in a room by himself. I'm talking about Derek Mason, and think through what's realistic. Realistically, the goal when you play somebody like Florida right now with what you have is, could we get to 17? If we can get to 17 and we can keep the number of plays that Florida is on the field offensively in that 65 to 70 range, it could get interesting. And I think they had a chance in the South Carolina game to, if they'd gotten a 14-0 lead, does the game change? Sure it does. It creates a lot more, tightness on South Carolina's end. It's a game they have to win. it doesn't do any good for South Carolina to go to Georgia and win and then lose at home to Vandy. So suddenly there's a lot of pressure on South Carolina if you get to 14-0. But if really what you're doing is playing with the here's your 7, go win it, man, that's tough.
Well, and the other example of default thinking was when they get the ball, they get 2 quick first downs off running plays. And they get the ball back with like a minute 41 left. No, they'd run the clock down a little bit with those running plays. But point is, they've got a field goal kicker who's got a pretty good leg. I mean, if you told me Riley Gay hits from 55, I'm not laughing at you. He's got a great leg. So you've got, I don't know, about a minute left, 45 seconds. You got to get maybe 25 yards to get your guy in range. They got Deuce Wallace sacked, and I get that maybe that upsets your play calling. But point is, they had timeouts there to use. You know, you could have called some different things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if your life depends on it, you can get within 25 to 30 yards for field goal. And it's back to that no sense of urgency with them that just is driving their fan base crazy.
Well, let me apologize on one end because I think I've put a scenario out there that isn't fair. It was actually 7-7 at that point, wasn't it?
Which point? I've lost track of
the
the
4th and 2 from the 38.
You know, let me look that up. I think that sounds right. But go ahead while I'm checking on that.
Well, if I'm wrong with the scenario, they may have gone with the, you know, let's take a 7-7 tie into the locker room. I say that, not that I wasn't watching the game, but I was also really closely looking at the Memphis game and what they've gotten done there. And I'm just amazed. You know, I did a game one time as Memphis State's announcer that looked a lot like the Liberty Bowl did Saturday night. The difference was 35,000 of the fans that particular night were Ole Miss fans, where in this one it was simply Memphis with a smattering of SMU. It's really impressive. They're fun. They're a lot of fun, and that's one of the reasons that Norvell's name is going to come up in a lot of jobs, just simply because they're fun. Now they can't play defense with anybody, and they get the benefit of a conference that makes it easier. If they had to do that in the SEC, they'd get demolished. But they're fun on offense. Did I stall enough there?
Yeah, you did. That was great. You gave me more than it's almost like you do this for a living.
Huh?
Yeah. And I want to circle back to Mike Norvell, so don't let me forget. Okay. That was their second drive of the game. They were actually up 7-0. That play had gone 7 plays, 48 yards, and they punted from the 43 because they took a delay of game penalty.
Took the delay of game.
Yeah, when they tried to have Deuce Wallace, or I guess it was Deuce at that point, draw them off sides. Now listen to this. These are their drives the rest of the game after that, because the first one they go 11 for 77, and then that one 7 for 48. 3 for 4, 3 for 1, 4 for -4, 6 for 26, 3 for 4, 3 for 8, 4 for 13, 2 for 7, and 4 for 20 to end the game, and 2 of those ended in interceptions, by the way. So they didn't gain more than 26 yards on a drive after the first quarter.
That's bad.
Yeah. Let me ask you on Mike Norvell. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know, maybe you know and you can't say. There seems to be some sort of stench around him that makes it tough for him to get other jobs. Do you have any idea what that's about?
I haven't got a clue. I've heard the same theory that you've heard, but I have no idea what that would be. I know this. The guy can really coach offensive football. Sure, he inherited a better situation than most Memphis coaches inherit. It is so weird to watch right now for me, because the year I was down there, we were really good on defense. Man, we had some guys that could run to the football, and offensively, we just didn't have much. But that year, our Memphis State team beat Ole Miss and Alabama because we were really good on the defensive end, and we would get just enough done on offense to be dangerous to win 20-17 or whatever. So it's really interesting to watch. I do know this. For his own career good, he better find the job this year, because he's not going to be able, I don't think, year in and year out to get Memphis football to that level. If he does, listen, great for him. But I think Saturday was a moment in the sun that you cannot expect to replicate time and time again.
Ann Arbor says, I'm guessing it would take a lot for athletic director Malcolm Turner to fire Derek Mason simply because a coaching search would distract him from the strategic plan work, and a buyout may reduce what he can spend on projects. Do you guys both agree?
Yes, I do agree, but that doesn't necessarily. He may judge that, as they go about trying to get money for a new stadium, that they've got to have something better. They've got to have something that the public has more confidence in. I agree with him in theory, but I don't think that guarantees that a change won't be made.
I think this is the best way to say it. Getting rid of him would be extremely expensive and on some fronts difficult for all those reasons. But at the same time, at some point, it is possible for the cost of keeping a guy to be expensive enough to outweigh the very expensive option of getting rid of him. And I think that's the territory that they are in.
Yep. And I think it's really teetering. It's dangerously close either way.
Dorfan says you have to choose and explain why. Belmont's athletics marketing team or Vanderbilt's?
Well, look.
Aren't you glad we ended on an easy one today?
Yeah, I love that one. Look, I'm going to be biased because those are some of those guys are guys that one is one I helped hire. Another one that was in there, helped me tremendously. I thought that when we were able to get Vanderbilt to play over there a couple of years ago, the day Darius Garland committed, man, we put a great foot forward. Everybody in there had a red shirt. It created just a sea of red. I thought we did a lot of things really well that the general public sometimes would not see, because, it's Belmont. It's not an SEC school. That said, there was a time in my life when I wanted to be Vanderbilt's marketing and promotions director. And friends of mine know that. That day is probably come and gone, because I think it is such a monumental task. I don't really know if it's doable. There was a time I thought it was, but it's now, you're now looking at two lost generations of fans that they really have not been able to attract. And it might be one of the toughest fan base rebuilds in America. You think about it. How many are tougher than this?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot right now. I will tell you this. I think everybody over there is kind of holding their breath to see what happens at the turn of the year. I think they have an AD who's putting together a really ambitious plan. And from what I understand, he's going to have clearance and pretty substantial help from the university in the form of a matching campaign as he goes about his whatever it is that they come up with. But I think the thing is everybody's waiting to see what happens with the chancellor and what the board tells him. But from what I understand, he is really aiming high. I mean, really aiming high with what he would like. And I think that'll be the moment of truth for everything. Because I think if they can do things along the lines of what I think he wants, I think I don't think there's, I say this, Franklin proved otherwise. I think that there's going to be a rebuild for whoever the next coach is if they make a change. But I think if they start doing the capital improvements and things in the way that he wants, I think it's something everybody can get behind and say, okay, we may go through some rough years, but we're used to that. And once the dust settles from this, I think we've got a chance. I think that's the place where he's going to try to get them to. I hope that the board and the people there will get on board with what it is he wants.
I'm going with your info, and I hope that all this pans out. That would be good news. Be huge news.
Is there anything we didn't cover today that's worth mentioning?
I think we'll probably wait till next week to get into world peace. We didn't get into the Gaza Strip at all. So, other than those two things, I think we covered about everything.
This is not your first rodeo, is it?
Well, no. And if we're going to go down that direction, does that mean I need to say I to do this, but I run?
Hey, or, we should have started the podcast with "Let's Ride." But anyway,
this is always fun, though. I enjoy doing this with you, Chris.
Well, me too, and I appreciate it. Man, if anybody, this is why I have you. If anybody knows the landscape of what it is like to do this from my microphone, it is you. And I'm really grateful that I have found you, and also you've been willing to pick up the phone between episodes and just hear me out on stuff, because I don't think they make a roadmap for how to do these things when it gets like this.
Listen, we all need little mini psychiatrists in our world. There have been people over the years, you've bounced things off of. Gosh, I had the best one that the world ever put on this planet in C.M. Newton. And, I bugged the daylights out of him over the years. Willie was another one for me who was a really good sounding board, because Willie could oftentimes be the good cop to the bad cop. He was the rational to the emotional, irrational me. We all need somebody that kind of talks us off the ledge a little bit. And boy, if I'm doing that, you have really stooped to low goals in me.
So are you going to add like sports journalist shrink to your business card now?
You know what?
I think you should.
Can we get paid for that?
I don't know. There's a lot of things I would get paid for if I could. But anyway.
Let's work on
it. Yeah, that work may take a while. But in any case, hey, thank you so much for joining us. Tell people where they can find your shows and also your Twitter handle, which, believe it or not, you do have.
Yes, I do. Let's go with you can hear our show Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. on 560 AM, which is WNSR, or 95.9 on FM. They've also got an app that allows you to hear it anywhere, WNSR app. And my Twitter handle, to the shock of many, and also to the shock of me, is George Plaster TM.
Well, I think that's short and gets to the point, and I hope we got to the point in this podcast. I think we did, and I appreciate you joining me as always.
Listen, it was my pleasure. You take care. Have a good week.
He is George Plaster. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll have more of these coming later in the week.